Why don't we get started? Welcome, everyone. Happy Monday. I'm the Grey Strega, and I'm here to give you your daily collective read for today, Monday, February 16th, 2026. We are going to be doing a masculine, feminine, and non-binary energy update today. We are going to be starting our read with diving into masculine energy. We'll be utilizing the Smith-Waite Centennial deck to read into the headspace of masculine. Can I please have, bearing in mind this is not based on gender, but what one feels most aligned to? Can I get 3 cards, please? 3 cards we are starting our day off with today we have here, come on, one more, please. We are starting with our 9 of Cups in its upright, the Judgment card in its upright, as well as the 8 of Cups in its reversal. Let's talk a little bit about what we're effectively seeing right now, specifically as it relates to masculine headspace. There's a lot of cup energy here, and I'm not surprised to see a lot of cup energy right now, given the fact that we're moving into this Pisces new moon. This Pisces new moon is going to feel a lot like a full moon. A lot of emotionality coming up, a lot of potential feelings coming up. And one of the things that we also potentially observe or recognize that's happening right now is working into the space of being able to effectively articulate upon our feelings. One of the things that we keep on seeing that's happening right now for a lot of the masculine energy is working through modalities or experiences by which they themselves were not carrying their emotions as well as they energetically could have, is all I keep on seeing. And one of the beautiful things that we effectively observe in relationality to working through that point of identifying or recalibrating, as it were, is, and I want to describe this, and we see this often with Jupiter in Cancer, right? The observation or the recognition in terms of working through something, but not just working through something, but the ability to articulate upon how we're feeling, right? This is what we talk about. These cards, when we look at them in combination, are often a conversation on the power of introspection, right? This is often something that we can see when we're working through Aquarius season, right? Because when we avoid something, we don't get energetically stronger upon it, right? It's often the space by which we ourselves feel energetically vulnerable. So, what we're effectively identifying or working through is potentially masculine, that is observing and identifying the state of the emotions that exist within that others can't see unless we do the work to effectively communicate upon them properly, right? It requires, and it's often the space by which we identify or articulate our feelings that allow the feelings to become tangible. And so I think that there's something really interesting in that, in relationality to the tangibility of emotions, because what we're effectively seeing that's happening is the space by which one is identifying or recognizing that it creates, like, it doesn't require the sense of another person effectively feeling like they have to do the detective work to try to figure out our emotions. When we're being energetically responsible for them, we do our best to effectively communicate them as well as we can. And so this is really beautiful because we see that that's a lot of the energy of the healed masculine that is working into the context of the responsibility of communicating emotions so that they can be healed, and potentially working through experiences in the past by which, right? By which it felt like another person had to effectively, like, get to the bottom of something instead of articulating something clearly. Now, this brings us to feminine energy. And for feminine energy right now, we are going to be utilizing the Tarot of the Divine for the headspace of feminine right now. 3 cards, please. We have here the Hierophant in its upright, in combination with the Temperance card in its reversal, in combination with the 8 of Wands in its reversal. Now, this is really intriguing Because what we effectively see, we see a lot of major arcana right now in the headspace of feminine. And what we're effectively identifying, or what we're seeing that's effectively occurring there, is for a lot of the feminine energy working through the ability to effectively articulate or communicate upon the emotions. And what we like about this is, particularly and especially with the Hierophant, that identification point, or that experience by which we ourselves are like identify, or like, and has a lot to do with the working through what we effectively have patience for versus what we don't have patience for. And this is something that's going to come up a lot, particularly and especially as we're navigating into that Aries energy that we see that recently Saturn and Neptune both moved into, because you have to understand that what we effectively recognize that's often happening with Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries, it's often a question of working through what we ourselves energetically tolerate. And I want to describe that the ability to effectively navigate through tolerance is often the space. And I keep on getting that this is something that's energetically important to feminine, right? That our ability to effectively identify or tolerate is often the space by which we effectively communicate, right? And it's not enough, like often in the space by which things are effectively feeling that pressure on the self, or those modalities by which we ourselves feel frustrated, right? The ability to effectively identify and recognize and articulate to others, right? The difference between something that is energetically comfortable versus something that we're energetically tolerating helps us to effectively refine upon our relationships more, because I keep on getting, it has to do with the finalitude of working through something, but not just the state by which we feel like that sense of finalitude, but the state by which we ourselves are effectively able to communicate our own energetic frustration towards things. So I think that this is very intriguing, because what we really see that's happening for a lot of the feminine energy, and I like to see this when we're moving into that Pisces new moon energy, is like and I want to describe the combination of what we're seeing here between masculine and feminine. Again, bearing in mind this is not based on gender, but what one feels most aligned to. We see that masculine, right? Especially, and I want to show you this because do you see I want you to see the similarity in these cards right now if you're a tarot nerd, right? We've got masculine working through this 8 of Cups energy, right? Which is the understanding of working through the context that the feelings we feel don't exist to others unless we're doing the work to communicate them, right? And what do we see that the feminine is articulating, right? Feminine is in the space of recognizing and saying the difference between the difference between feeling something and tolerating something is letting others know, right? Like letting others know what feels like the weight of working through that tolerance, right? The observation of effectively feeling that sense of heavy, like the broad approach that we take to something that then allows us to be able to identify and recognize new solutions to potentially be found there. So we see that for a lot of the masculine energy, this could be feeling like a lot of emotionality coming through, while for the feminine, this could be working into the space of identifying and recognizing how to effectively communicate more. Now let's get into the non-binary space. For non-binary right now, we're going to be utilizing the Aquarian Tarot. 3 cards, please. For the headspace of non-binary, we've got coming out the 4 of Pentacles in its reversal, in combination with the Sun card in its upright, in combination with the Devil card in its reversal. So what we're effectively identifying and seeing right now for a lot of the non-binary energy is, I feel like this is a lot of the energy that we're seeing that is effectively taking new approaches to things. And the observation of working into new approaches, I just keep on seeing it's working it's working into the context of new approaches, but it's also being able to identify and recognize and working towards. I keep on seeing the space by which joy is something that we ourselves amplify and articulate in relationality to being able to identify what like how we effectively feel about things, or being able to effectively have one's feelings heard. And so in a way, what we're effectively seeing, it's a combination of both the work that we see that both masculine and feminine are doing at this time, right? Because it's working into the space of the emotions, right? The underground emotions that we often feel, that we're able to articulate as it relates to making sure that others are aware of them, while also broadening our own energetic tolerance towards things in the way that we ourselves are effectively able to amplify and articulate upon what feels comfortable versus what one is tolerating, that is leading into the context of identifying or recognizing what feels like energetic expansion, or the modality by which they themselves are working to heal. And I feel like what we're seeing for a lot of that energy right now is building into the context of feeling. I keep on, and I want to describe this because this is often what we see that happens when we're working through eclipse cycles, is we can sometimes feel a little bit of that sense of energetic surrealness, because it's the identification point of working through expansion in the space by which we feel things that we haven't felt before. So we see that for a lot of that energy, the ability to try to communicate upon, right? The ability to try to communicate upon something that feels energetically ephemeral, right? I feel like that's a lot of the work that we see by which the conversations that are happening, specifically as it relates to partnership, have to do with the observation. And I wouldn't be surprised right now if some of that energy feels like they get very frustrated going through, right? Like going through the same energetic like cycles again, or going through something in a way by which they feel energetically frustrated, but also identifying and recognizing what it means to effectively refine upon it, right? So something that is getting finer is often something that we're doing again, but we do it in a way that allows the context of something effectively improving. So I feel like it's interesting because I almost feel like a lot of that energy is working through patience, but the patience that starts with the self as they're able to articulate and identify what they themselves are feeling energetically frustrated about. Now we're going to move back towards masculine energy right now, and we're going to be looking into the heart space of masculine. We're going to be utilizing for masculine heart space right now. We're going to be utilizing the no, we're going to be utilizing the Tarot of the Divine for the heart space of masculine. 3 cards, please. We've got here the Queen of Wands in its reversal, the Queen of Swords in its upright, and the Eight of Cups in its upright. So, what do we effectively see that's happening right now in relationality to a lot of that masculine energy? And I want to describe that what we're effectively seeing, and I want to point this out, particularly with this Queen of Wands energy in its reversal. It's the observation of effectively identifying and recognizing what feels, I keep on getting what feels energetically supportive, but not just what feels supportive, what we ourselves are identifying in relationality to having the sense of working through, like observing what it feels in terms of building into the context of a relationship with strong counterpart is what I keep on seeing. And one of the things I keep on seeing in relationality to strong counterpart connection, especially with this Queen of Swords here in combination with the Queen of Wands and its reversal, the one thing I want to identify there is working into the state by which we ourselves are able to energetically appreciate. And one of the things I see that's happening right now for a lot of that masculine energy is building into, and I want to describe this because some of this that we're seeing in the heart space of masculine right now has a lot to do with the observation of like the state by which we build into strong counterpart. And I keep on getting like there's almost like I want to describe there's like almost like this feeling of disgust that I'm picking up on in masculine heart space as it relates to those that are in the unhealed space by which they're not looking for true counterpart connection is what I keep on seeing. Because and I want to describe this, right? Because the sense of energetic the our ability of building into strong counterpart connection is equally balanced with our own ability to make peace with our vulnerability. And what we keep on identifying that's happening right now for a lot of that masculine energy is working into the space of the consequence when we haven't made peace with our vulnerability, right? Because when we work into the space by which we don't see vulnerability as the gift, then we hate the vulnerability that we find within. And then what happens in the modality by which we have that hate of vulnerability within, right? Then when we see vulnerability in counterpart, right, it creates this love hate feeling that we identify and derive there, right? Because it feels like a reflection point of the vulnerability that we effectively deny ourselves. So that's why we see that this is a lot of the masculine energy that is working into the context of self love. It's the observation of the love that we bring to ourselves that start with our most vulnerable spaces, because this is the consequence. Like, this is what happens. Like, when we talk about a toxic culture, this is what happens. This is the natural consequence when you hate the vulnerability within, right? Because when you hate the vulnerability within, and then you say that you effectively desire vulnerability in counterpart, right? It doesn't feel like love. It feels like you're trying to heal the part of yourself that revolts against it, right? It creates a lot of unhappiness as it relates to that negative push or pull that we often feel. But when we come into the space of identifying and protecting the vulnerability within us, then it creates the state by which when we see vulnerability in another, we identify it and recognize it as the gift that it is, right? It builds into the state by which we ourselves feel energetically supported. And so we keep on seeing that for a lot of the energy doing that work, working through modalities or scenarios like that, we keep on seeing that that is a lot of the energy that is working through the vulnerability, but it's the vulnerability that they find within themselves that they're learning to heal. Because I keep on seeing that the masculine is recognizing that when they heal the vulnerability within, right, it allows the ability to celebrate the vulnerability that we see without, right? It's a space by which we feel that sense of embracing rather than being in that space by which we push it away. But it's not easy is all we keep on seeing. There's a lot of potential emotionality there, but even in that emotionality, we recognize and identify that that's a lot of the energy that's like working into the context of allowing themselves to feel their emotions in order to effectively heal them. Now, this brings us to the feminine energy. Moving into the heart space of feminine, we're going to be utilizing the Aquarian Tarot right now for the heart space of feminine. 3 cards, please. We've got here the Ace of Cups in its upright, the 3 of Swords in its reversal, as well as the Strength card in its upright. So there's a lot of strong cards that we're effectively identifying right now in the heart space of feminine. And I think that what we're effectively seeing there is working into the context of what feels emotionally supportive. And I keep on getting that for a lot of that energy, working through those modalities or experiences, I keep on identifying that that's a lot of the energy that recognizes and identifies what it is that they themselves are working to heal from, is what I keep on getting. And I feel like a lot of that energy that we see that is occurring there is the feminine recognizing and identifying what it feels like to energetically heal from circumstances or situations by which they themselves doubted themselves, right? A lot of that Three of Swords in its reversal identifies where that effective work begins. So this is a lot of the energy that's working into the context of trusting themselves. But even in the state by which they trust themselves, I keep on seeing that that's a lot of the energy that is working through, right? Working through that process of healing in relationality to situations or circumstances of the past, right? Right, and this is what happens, like, what does a trauma environment effectively do? A trauma environment effectively makes you feel like you have to doubt yourself. So we see that this is a lot of the energy of the feminine being able to effectively recognize or identify a trauma environment that they're effectively working to heal from in the past. But even as they're effectively able to do that, they're building into the context of recognizing and identifying what feels energetically stabilizing, right? And so that's a lot of the energy. And I like this because I keep on seeing that it's working through the responsible communication as it relates to situations and circumstances by way of which they themselves often had those energetic frustrations, right? This is a lot of the energy that is getting better at effectively articulating upon things in real time, right? Working on the space. I keep on hearing like not allowing the context of harboring anything because often what happens when one is energetically harboring. When you're harboring, it's the modality by which another person thinks something is fine, but it's not fine. And then in the modality by which you're effectively able to articulate it, it feels like those explosive moments. So we see that this is a lot of the energy that is getting better at effectively communicating in the state by which they themselves are able to identify or speak upon what it is that they are working to heal from. Now, this brings us to the non-binary energy. And for the non-binary energy right now, we're going to be reading into the heart space and we're going to be utilizing the Smith-Waite Centennial deck for the heart space of non-binary at this time. 3 cards, please. We have here 2, 3, one more, please. Thank you. We have the Strength card in its upright. So we've got a similarity right now to the heart space of feminine. We've got the Death card in its upright. And we also have here the Seven of Swords in its reversal. So let's talk a little bit about some of this energy that we're effectively seeing. And I feel like what's interesting right now for a lot of the energy working through this is identifying and recognizing their own ability to effectively their own conversation as it relates to what feels energetically productive versus what feels, I want to describe, like I keep on hearing like productive versus irritating in terms of a lot of this energy. And let's talk about the nature. Like let's talk about the nature of working through something that we are effectively irate upon, right? And I keep on and there's a continuation here that we're effectively seeing. And a lot of that continuation of what we're effectively seeing has a lot to do with the observation of what we ourselves are working to energetically change. And I keep on getting a lot of that there is building into the context of feeling the right to be upset about things, right? Because what we're effectively identifying in relationality to working through the feeling of being upset is often the space by which we're able it's good I keep on writing, it's good to be upset because when you're upset and you're able to articulate what's effectively bothering the self, then it allows the ability to identify and to have something more productive to occur, right? It's the work into the context of productivity that allows for new solutions to be possible. So I feel like what we're effectively seeing right now for a lot of the energy that's working through that is trying to identify and recognize situations and circumstances by way of being as pragmatic as possible. And why do we see that there's something important there via V working through pragmatism? Because when we're energetically pragmatic, then it's the observation of effectively working like it's the space by which we ourselves are able to effectively identify and articulate upon the things that are effectively bothering us or the space by which we ourselves are working through something. And so I feel like it's interesting because I see a lot of that energy feeling protective, but it feels like they're being protective with good reason, right? Like there's a protectiveness there, but the protectiveness the protectiveness feels like a qualifier, right? It's the protectiveness that we often feel that gives us it gives us or creates the observation in relationality to what is effectively frustrating us. And when we're feeling I keep on getting when we're feeling energetically frustrated, we're able to find new solutions to old problems. So I think that there's something really important there because, and I need to point this out, like the combination force that we see right now between the strength card and the death card in combination is often the conversation that we identify as it relates to feeling energetically fortified in something, but then taking a new approach to something that allows for a new solution to be formed. So I've got a lot of that energy there and I feel like I feel like it's like an active conversation, but I keep on getting it's the frustration that effectively allows for new ground, right? It's like it's working into something in a space by which they themselves are looking at something with a fresh set of eyes or with like a new sense of perspective upon things. Now, this is bringing us to the unconscious back into masculine unconscious space. And for our unconscious of masculine right now, we are going to be utilizing the Aquarian Tarot. Can I please get 3 cards, please? We've got here the 5 of Swords in its reversal, the 10 of Cups in its reversal, and the 3 of Wands in its upright. So what are we effectively identifying right now for a lot of the unconscious space of masculine? I feel like for a lot of that energy, what we're effectively observing is working through situations and circumstances by which they themselves are able to effectively identify and articulate upon their own I keep on getting their own feeling of emotionality. I keep on getting there's a lot of emotion there, but there's emotion that's coming through in the way of identifying and recognizing. I keep on getting the emotions that we feel do not become real to others unless we come into the space of being able to communicate them, right? And I'm not surprised to see this type of energy when we're working through experiences like this new moon in Pisces because it's a conversation upon working through the ephemeral nature of emotions. And what do we identify when we're working through the ephemeral nature of emotions? It's the observation of often the space by which we feel solitude in our emotions, right? Like the emotions that we feel are solitary places until we come into the modality by which we bring them forth. And then when we come into the space by which we articulate the emotions effectively feel like they solidify and become real, right? And this is what we talk about in relationality to working into the space of facing our emotions, right? It's the observation, and this is what's interesting about it, right? Because what we're effectively seeing, and this is what's so intriguing when we think of emotions like a substance. Like when you think of emotions like a substance, it's interesting because often the space by which we do not feel that emotions become real until we articulate them, right? This is effectively, right? This is a falsity, right? Because it's the observation that when we're energetically avoiding things, others experience our avoidance, right? It's a continuation it's a continuation of working through the avoidance. And what happens, right? What often happens when we energetically avoid something? We become extremely sensitive about it, right? It's the observation of the energetic sensitivity, right, that others experience as we're avoiding, right? Because we're energetically not facing something. So it's very much it's often and this is often what happens, right? We see this in others, right? And this is what we talk about as it relates to facing things, because often the modality by which we ourselves are ready to face something, others are already aware of it, right? Because it's the modality by which we're working to avoid it that almost it's like the avoidance, right? That is profound, that requires others to effectively navigate it. So we see that for a lot of the energy effectively doing that work, right? I feel like this is what I mean in terms of the energy of the masculine getting more responsible with their emotions, because it's the responsibility that they're effectively finding that allows the space by which they say, when we effectively are responsible with our emotions, we deal with them so that others don't have to deal with our avoidance of them, right? Now, moving back towards feminine, and for feminine right now, we're going to be utilizing the Smith-Waite Centennial deck. 3 cards, unconscious, please. Thank you. 1, 2, and 1 more, please. 3. Thank you. We've got here the 9 of Wands in its reversal, in combination with the 10 of Cups in its reversal, in combination with the Knight of Wands in its reversal. So let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing right now with feminine energy in relationality to working it through the context of healthy counterpart connection. Because everything that we're effectively identifying, working into the context of that connection, has a lot to do with healthy communication. And we often see, and one of the things that we see that's happening a lot for feminine energy is recognizing the difference between energy that effectively creates doubt for no other reason than to effectively try to limit or hinder the perception of feminine in being able to effectively celebrate the self, is what I keep on seeing. And what do we identify in relationality to that, right? The observation of being able to work through the space of identifying. And it's interesting too, because like I feel like there's a lot of Venus energy right now currently in the unconscious of feminine, and a lot of that Venus energy that we're seeing there has to do with the space of feminine identifying and recognizing what it feels like to be energetically supported by counterpart, right? And I keep on getting that for a lot of that energy, working through those modalities or working through those experiences, that observation of what feels energetically supportive is often working into the space by which they themselves have had those moments or experiences by which they've been in counterpart connection that have created the space of making themselves doubt themselves, is what I keep on seeing. And I just keep on getting that a lot of the work that we see that happens, particularly with feminine, is working into the context of trusting, right? I keep on hearing, like, trusting their own sense of stabilization is what I keep on getting, right? And this is the counterpart connection that identifies the healthy counterpart that often creates the space by which we learn to trust ourselves more. So we see that for a lot of the energy doing that work, working through modalities or experiences by which they themselves have often like I keep on getting, like, working through the context of experiences by which they themselves have felt wounded, right? But working into the space of healing because it's the observation of recognizing the healthy counterpart energy that helps us to identify and trust ourselves more. So I keep on getting that there's a lot of that energy there that even as they're working through that, they're building into healthy connection with counterpart, either in solitude or with healthy counterpart connection. And that connection is helping them to heal from experiences by which they themselves felt like they had to be less in order to effectively maintain an energetic connection. Now this brings us to the non-binary space, and for non-binaries unconscious right now, we are going to be utilizing we are going to be utilizing we're going to be utilizing the tarot of the divine for the unconscious of non-binary. 3 cards to clarify, please. 1, 2, 3. We have here the Tower card in its upright in combination with the Lover's card in its upright, in combination with the Empress in its upright. So let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing in relationality to a lot of that energy. Because what we're effectively observing, the one thing that we're energetically observing there has to do with, how do I describe this best? I feel like there's something I feel like there's something very important that we see is evolving in relationality to the unconscious of non-binary that has to do with having to effectively recognize and identify what feels like a trauma environment. And I keep on seeing that there's like, and I want to describe this, the difference between a trauma environment and sanctuary is the space by which one does not feel that one constantly has to have one's own guard up, right? The space by which and this is what I keep on identifying here, right? The modality by which we often feel that we have to have our guard up is often the space by which we effectively don't feel like the space by which we ourselves can be energetically vulnerable, right? It's the conversation that we often navigate as it relates to building into a sense of being safe, seen, and supported, right? The state by which we ourselves feel upon that, or working through how we effectively identify that. And so everything I keep on seeing in relationality to a lot of the work that I see that they themselves are doing has to do with the conversation as it relates to experiences. And I keep on hearing experiences by which, and I keep on getting this, that the problem with trauma is that trauma turns us into things, right? And the hard part about it is who we become in a state of trauma is often what we needed in order to effectively survive a trauma environment, right? And so I see that a lot of that energy works through, right? They work through the modality of having to navigate, and I keep on seeing this, experiences by which another person finds that traumatized sense of themselves energetically appealing, right? And so this is why I see that a lot of that energy works through the context of setting healthy boundaries, because it's the conversation that identifies that when we move towards something that feels like it's energetically healthier, the sound that we should observe is celebration. But unfortunately, sometimes we don't get that luxury. Sometimes we don't get the luxury of that because the modality by which another person finds the traumatized version of self more energetically appealing, like this is what we talk about as it relates to setting healthy boundaries, because it's the state by which this energy often moves through things as they recognize that they're taking healthier approaches, and another person articulates that they miss the past version of self, and somebody effectively observing or articulating to another and saying that that effective person that they energetically miss was the result of the trauma that they were trying to effectively survive, right? And this is why I keep on seeing that a lot of that energy like works into the space of identifying and recognizing weird circumstances like that, right? The unappealing quality by which another person desires an unhealed part of the self that was created in order to survive instead of energetically thrive. But that modality or the experience, right? This is why we talk about the state of building into healthy transformation, because when we're building into something that's healthy, right, we celebrate and we don't feel nostalgic for unhealed versions of the self, right? It moves us into the space of what feels energetically productive. And so I just keep on seeing that for a lot of the energy, right? Like this is why they work through healthy boundaries, because it's not, I keep on hearing, it's not about who misses the self. It's about who welcomes the healing, the healed version of self that is moving towards the understanding of being able to effectively energetically connect into a space by which we ourselves feel supported. And so I feel like there's a lot of that energy that kind of works through circumstances or scenarios like that, but the context by which they often feel like they have to articulate upon, right, the modality by which they feel like they have to articulate upon the circumstances by which they themselves have lost energetic connection with others, not having to do, right, not having to do with the state by which they feel supported, but the observation of who felt like who they feel left as they proceeded on their own healing journey. That bottom of the deck right now, moving back towards masculine energy, we have here 3 of Swords. And so the 3 of Swords with the bottom of the deck is often articulating upon situations and circumstances by which we ourselves work through. Like I keep on getting, this is a lot of the continuation that we're going to see. And I just need to stress this because as we're continuing into this Pisces new moon energy, it's working into the context of being able to recognize and identify how we ourselves communicate upon how we feel. And I keep on seeing that the way that we communicate frustration is always in the space by which we articulate it. It's the space by which we ourselves effectively identify or work through something. And I keep on seeing that for a lot of that energy, there's some kind of observation that is potentially occurring in relationality to circumstances or situations by which they recognize a tendency by which we all have these modalities by which we recognize our tendency to self-sabotage, right? And why do we see that there's that tendency to self-sabotage? Because and I like to describe this trauma, right? Trauma feels comfortable. Trauma feels comfortable because we recognize it, right? It feels like familiar territory. And the space by which we often energetically regress into familiar territory, it's understanding. And this is why it's so difficult to heal from trauma environments, because at least when you're in an energetic trauma environment, you know, right? You know what to energetically expect, right? It's the observation and the identification that allows you to feel, right? To feel that space. But this is why, right? And this is why we navigate discomfort, right? Because if you're hoping to heal from trauma, get ready to feel discomfort because good is going to feel weird. It's like normal, like something that feels stable is going to feel odd, right? And this is why we work through, right? This is why we work through the understanding of the uncomfortability because healing is an uncomfortable place. Like if you want to heal, get ready to feel uncomfortable, right? It's like it's gonna feel surreal because you're gonna be moving towards something that you've never experienced before, and then you're gonna potentially experience fear, and you're gonna wanna move back to the trauma environment because at least there you have the understanding of what you energetically recognize. So the ability to effectively familiarize ourselves with unconventional spaces is how we effectively expand, right? It's how we effectively energetically adapt because, right? We can't articulate that we aspire for change and then feel energetically uncomfortable with the nature of change, which is the unfamiliarity that comes as it relates to new experiences. So we see that that's a lot of that energy that's working through those modalities or experiences, but even as they're navigating that, I keep on getting and it's like it's working into it's the uncomfortability that feels unfamiliar, but unfamiliar in the best way possible because it's the observation of what it is that we ourselves are understanding that we need to change in order to effectively move towards something that we aspire for. So I feel like this is a lot of the energy that is getting better at feeling uncomfortable, but not just feeling uncomfortable, being able to effectively recognize the nature of uncomfortability, the difference between uncomfortable that feels positive, right? The uncomfortability that feels positive in terms of navigating healthy, healthy unconventional spaces versus the uncomfortability that we often feel when something is amiss or out of place. Now, and the only way you're able to know that is the only way you're able to identify that is if you allow yourself to feel things and working through it. Now, for feminine energy, we're going to be utilizing bottom of the deck, Smith Waite Centennial deck, two of wands in its reversal, right? And for a lot of the feminine energy, I just keep on saying for a lot of the feminine energy, it's working into the context of being able to be clear is what I keep on getting. The gift of clarity. And here's the thing that with a lot of the feminine energy, recognizing this, clarity is a shield. Clarity is a shield. And when you think about the fact that clarity is a shield, it's the understanding that in the experience by which you're clear, prepare for rejection, right? In the space by which you're energetically clear, you prepare for rejection because your clarity, right? Unhealthy energy hates clarity, right? Unhealthy things hate clarity. So when you're bringing clarity to situations, another person, right, effectively working into the space by which they themselves experience clarity and then they get weird, right? Often working through rejection. I feel like this is a lot of the energy of the feminine that builds into the context of feeling like working through being like, I could not be clearer. They got weird. Oh, look. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at all that protection. Look at all that protection. It's a lot of the feminine going, I brought clarity. They got weird. Oh, look at all that protection, right? The modality by which we recognize that clarity is a shield, right? It's often not the space by which another person meets our clarity with clarity, but the fact that we recognize that we could not be clearer and another person gets weird, then that is the clarity that provides protection because the clarity acts as shield. Like, where'd she go? What happened? I don't know. I just brought clarity and I don't know what happened. Like it's it's like, oh look, the trauma hates clarity, right? It's just the observation that we effectively recognize and identify in those experiences. And I wanna describe this is why, like and I need to point this out, like, the healing journey, like, prepare to have confusing circumstances come up, right? Because it's a responsibility of understanding, right? Like, when you're in a healing space, you don't go chasing after someone to try to figure out why they're being energetically weird. It's like, if it's just like, you just you just gonna do one of these. Right? The world's a confusing space, and if you spend all your time trying to figure out other people's weirdness, like, prepare to be exhausted, because some people don't even understand their own weirdness. You try to go down into a you don't go into the weird well. If someone hasn't figured out their own weird well, you'll be down there for a long time. You'll be down there for a long t I don't know how long. They don't know how long they don't know how deep it goes. It's not your job to effectively figure it out. And so for non-binary energy, like, bottom of the deck. We've got the Page of Cups. We got the Page of Cups in its upright. And here's the thing about it, and this is what we like. The non-binary energy, this is the thing. They work on like it's the understanding, and this is the beauty of working through the context of the self. It's understanding our weirdness versus others' weirdness, right? Like the space by which like the space by which we're healed is effectively an amplification of owning our own weirdness, right? It's a modality by which it's like it's understanding and saying like, yeah, I know what my portion of weirdness is. I don't know what that portion is, right? And the beauty that happens when we energetically own our weirdness is the space by which we become each other's joy, right? It's the observation of understanding, right? It's the understanding of our own personal well of the self, right? It's the understanding of what exists within our own cup and the space by which we work. And this is why we talk about it. And you'll often notice this, right? The space by which it's a good thing to be obsessed with understanding the self, right? It's a good thing to be obsessed with understanding the self because in the space by which we work to understand ourselves, we become a blessing to those around us, right? And what'll often happen? What'll often happen in a trauma environment? You'll be doing all your work to understand the self, and somebody will literally say to you, "You're self-obsessed," and being like, "Exactly." Right? That's not a bad thing, right? The understanding and the recognition, and this is the important thing, right? The difference between being obsessed with understanding the self is the space by which we become a safe space, right? When we become invested, when we become energetically invested in understanding ourselves, we become a safe space for those around us because it's the understanding that nobody's going to kind of hit something within us that we ourselves don't know to be there, right? It's not the modality by which we ourselves work through something, and it's the surprise energy, right? Like it's the space by which you don't find any surprises. And it's not to say that everything there is perfect, but the ability to understand and be able to rationalize in relationality to what effectively concerns us and the space by which we ourselves are able to articulate it. I keep on seeing that this is the energy that recognizes that that is the blessing for what it is, but has had to heal, right? Has had to heal from experiences by which another person tried to fault them for being too invested in understanding the self. Because when you understand the self, you have a tendency of not sticking around a trauma environment, right? You don't have that tendency of sticking around a space by which you yourself aren't energetically appreciated, nor are you in the space by which you create the space by which others make you question the self, because it's the questioning that you bring to the self that allows for the feeling of energetic stability. And in that stability, one finds solace because it's the solace that we find, that we recognize and identify, that has to do with our own sense of energetic responsibility in terms of how we feel versus what another person is trying to project upon us. That is our daily collective read for today. I want to thank you guys so much for being here and experiencing it. Just a reminder, if you would like to book a private reading with me, it is a two-step process. You have to book the reading, you have to pay for the reading. Please make sure you do both if you'd like to have that reading. Most importantly, please remember that I will never, ever, 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 ever reach out to you for a private reading. I will never DM you. I will never PM you. I will never slide into your inbox and tell you that I have a very important message that only I can deliver. The only way you can book a reading with me is if you book one on my site, so I would encourage you to do it there. Also, a couple of updates before we move into personal readings today. First and foremost, thank you to everybody who attended our recent class on the World card. Our next class will be held on Wednesday, February 18th at 6 p.m. PST, 9 p.m. Eastern. We will be continuing our studies into the tarot with a focus on the sword suites, the court cards in the sword suite. If you'd like to become a part of that tarot class program, it's going to be this Wednesday. And your paid subscription to my stack is your ticket of entry into our classes each and every month. As a monthly subscriber, you will have access to over 9 hours worth of material in the Tarot Church Library class archive. Now, it's not necessary to catch up. I'll be doing my best to give you an update on everything we've studied prior to beginning the next class. But if you want to catch up, you got a couple of days left too. And on top of that, you'll also have access to a one-on-one chat with me and the other students to ask any questions that you may have in relation to anything we've learned and studied thus far. And if you become a founding member to my stack, not only will you receive a discount on the whole year's worth of readings, but you'll also have access to over 20 hours worth of material in the Tarot Church Library class system, as well as a complimentary mentorship class with me where I will meet with you personally to assess where you are on your own personal tarot journey and give you the best insights in terms of how to utilize those classes to the best of your advantage moving towards your tarot goals going forward. One of the things I tried to do in these classes was make them accessible to the absolute novice tarot reader as well as the seasoned reader. There's definitely something there for everyone. Don't let your lack of experience or your robust experience prevent you from joining us in these classes. And even if you don't become a paid subscriber to my stack, I would encourage you to follow me there to stay up to date on any new offerings or services. I also post my weekly newsletter there, which will let you know about my in-person events as well as my online live schedule. You'll also have access to my mystic meditation articles. I just released one today on navigating this new moon that we've got coming up. I also want to let you guys know On top of my standard life path readings, I also offer mentorship classes. These are for any of my students seeking a more personalized educational experience with me. I take a very limited number of students for this reason, as those classes are focused on each individual's personal spiritual goals and journey work. Those classes can be purchased on an individual level or as a monthly class series, weekly or biweekly, as your schedule permits. Also, for my students that are seeking more consistent weekly tarot support, I'm very happy to offer weekly tarot insight packages. That is a package of 4 30-minute readings, again, weekly or biweekly as your schedule permits, so that you can stay more consistent on your personal journey. I'm also very happy to now offer dream interpretation readings, which you can purchase per dream or as a series. If you purchase a series, I would encourage you to start to keep a dream journal, as we will meet weekly or biweekly with that journal and utilize the tarot to understand the key themes and messages coming towards you in the dream space. I want to thank you guys so much for being here today and sharing in these messages, and we will do this again tomorrow. That is our daily collective read. We are going to get started